Chevre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmasurig. And so I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Vayeira, which contains one of the most famous stories of the whole Torah, the story of the Akedah, the 10th test of Avram. So today we're going to talk about the idea of tests and primarily about Mesiras Nefesh, a subject which according to Yiddishkeit, and especially in the light of Chassidus, is uniquely Jewish. And this we have to understand. Before that, we'll say a pasuk. As usual, we start with a pasuk. We'll start with the pasuk in Tehillim, which talks about tests. Nosata l'riecha neis lehisnoises mipnei koish etzel, which means that you gave to those who fear you a banner for rallying because of the truth, Selah. So we're going to this Hasidic interpretation immediately. Nes is a test, because Nes, as he says of it, could be a banner that means something which is lifted up high. It represents something which is higher, just like a banner or a flag on a ship. It's on top of the ship. So too, when Hashem makes a nes, which is also translated as a miracle sometimes, that means he lifts up the nature of the world into the supernatural. That's why it's called a miracle. It lifts up the world. And so too, we call a test, trials and tribulation, a nes, because through that, the person gets elevated. You give tests to those that fear you. Nes, a test. Lehisnoises, to become elevated. So this is one of the Torah approaches and perspectives on the whole idea of tests, because it's a famous question. God knows what's going to happen. So what's the point of the test? So basically there's two answers. One answer is that it's for the world. It's a demonstration for the world or for future generations to be inspired by this and to follow in the ways. And the other answer is it's for the person. He has a potential greatness, potential faculties, deeper levels, and when you put to the test, then these deeper faculties become revealed. So therefore the test is in order to maximize the potential of the person, spiritual levels of greatness. Okay, now let's go to the story of the Akedah. So the pasuk says, Vayeira Elav. So Hashem appeared, but Hashem tested Avram, and Hashem calls out to Avram, Vayemer Hineni, here I am. And Rashi says on this, here I am, Kachi ani yosem shel Chassidim. This is the response of the pious. Loshon novahu, it's an expression of humility. Here I am. V'loshon zimun, and it's an expression of readiness, like reporting for duty, sir. That's all. We'll get to that later. Then the Eibishter said, Vayemer kachno es bincho es yechidcho asher ahavto es Yitzchak. You should take your son, your only one whom you love, Yitzchak. And then the Eibishter says, Va'alei sham la'ela. You should bring him as a sacrifice. And over here, there's the famous Rashi, where Rashi says, Kach no. Hashem was pleading with Avram. No is nothing other than an expression of request. Hashem says to Avram, I beg of you, please don't let me down now. Stand firm for me in this trial, so that should not say the first trials loya ben mamish were not substantial. So basically, over here is a famous question. I'm going to repeat now a sikh of the Rebbe in Chelik Chaf of Likutei Sichos Parshas Vayeira. We're going to address a very, very huge, epic subject in Judaism, and I hope we'll cover most of the points. So the question over here is, why is it so important for Hashem that Avram not fail the 10th test? By saying that if you fail the 10th, it'll prove that all the previous 9 were not real tests. They had no substance. Ein mamish b'rishonim. Why? You could argue that he passed the first 9 tests because they were easier. 1, 2, 3, but wait, there's more. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 previous tests he passed. When it came to the 10th, because it was so much harder, he wasn't able to pass the 10th. Why do we say that if he fails the 10th, it's as if all the other 9 equal nothing? Why? And over here we go into a whole discussion. What makes Mesiras Nefesh a Jewish trait, connected only to Yiddishkeit? So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, again and again, talks about the subject, but primarily in chapter 18 and 19 of Likutei Amarim. And let's start at the beginning. A Jew has a nefesh elikis, a godly soul, a chelik elika mimal mamish. So God, Kaviyachol, takes a very part of himself, chelik elika mimal mamish, and he puts it into a yid. Das heißt, dass in a yid, it does ach, was a hechef von him. In a yid, there's something which is not really a part of creation, but a part of the Eibush himself. Nitzutz boire. So what? Because of that, a yid is able to do things that are neged de bria, which goes against every single rule of existence, every single rule and nature of creations could be transcended. So let's start, first of all, with the Alter Rebbe says, in chapter 19, Periketes, the Alter Rebbe says that the neshama's yearning to Hashem is like a flame to its source. And the point is, the Alter Rebbe says, what makes it unique? The flame is yearning to go into the Shayrish Ha'esh, Tachas Galgal Erech, Va'av Shali Nisher Memuhusa Ve'atzmusa Rishayin. What's going to happen to the flame as it becomes absorbed, hiskalos, in its source? What's going to happen is, it's going to become completely annihilated, so to speak. But that's not a good word. It's going to become absorbed in its source. Meaning to say, over here we see something unique. Every single time when there's a yearning, a desire, aspire for higher, you feel how you became higher. But over here, you can't say that something, once ois mitziyusei, he's going to reach a state where he's not going to sense it at all. Kol davar etzibikiyumei. This is the rule of all existence. All existence wants to remain in existence. And over here we're saying there's something unique. And we only find this by fire. And that's why we say, Neravai nishmas adam. That just like by fire, there's this thing that it wants to go back to its source, even though it won't feel the way it became elevated. It won't feel the way it became heightened. It won't feel that it reached a higher level of awareness or consciousness. It'll feel nothing. And nevertheless, this way desire is why? It's as if he has no choice. He's yearning. There's a drive to its source. And in Avodas Hashem, that means a loyalty, an attachment, a devotion, a connection, which cannot be explained. And this is, in different language, we say, sometimes there's a concept of a love, where the whole point of the love is, it's conditional. What does it mean it's conditional? It's because you gain a benefit. You feel the benefit. But a real Ava Atzmis, because in you there's something that's higher than you, and therefore you're able to transcend the laws, call it of physics, call it of nature, call it of existence, is because in us there's something higher than us. And this comes to a very, very important point. We've spoken about this many times. I'm not getting into all the details now of all the subjects. But Kedusha is selflessness, selfless. Klipas Noiga, there's a level called Klipas Noiga. For lack of a better word, we'll say that's an apple, that's a table. Those are things that are parav, they're not prohibited. That's called Klipas Noiga, which means we see easily how it could be elevated for good. That's called self. And then the Sholosh Klipas Atmei, so-called evil, the goodness, the spark is so covered up that the only way this spark will be revealed is through neglecting it, so to speak, through crushing it. And then the spark will be revealed. In any case, the point over here is like this. You see somebody who's ready to give up their life. The act of giving up your life, so-called martyrdom, doesn't represent true self-sacrifice. Why? Because it can be based on selfish reasons. It can be based on self, which means even though you're devoted to a cause, I'll soon explain, and even though you're devoted something good. But still, it makes sense. You're gaining something good. You gave away something small, and you gained something big, as we'll soon explain. But then comes the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh, the Mesiras Nefesh of a Yid, while in there, the episode is a hecha for there. There's a chelik of the Kalim Mamish. You could do something which is completely selfless, which means it doesn't make sense at all. But because you're so attached, you have absolute loyalty to the source. Even though you don't feel you're going to gain anything from it, not only you don't feel you're going to gain anything from it, you see no point in it. And that's how the Rebbe explains the uniqueness of that Kedah. But first, let's take it step by step. First of all, this is a story I once heard, that in the times of the Romans or the Greek, there was a person, he went into their temple, and he destroyed a statue, a figure, some bust of some people, some figure that they idolized. And it was such an affront, such a brazen act of disrespect, never happened before. And the whole country was talking about it. Somebody went into the temple, into their, whatever it is, and went to one of the deities and smashed it. Anyways, there was a search. Who did this? Okay, but the person wasn't happy. They only did it once. He decided he's going to do it again. By now, this is the biggest thing that everyone's talking about, and this is a search for this person who committed the crime. Everyone's searching for him, soldiers, etc., etc. Finally, they catch him. He's brought before the tribunal. He's brought before the court. And, of course, he's sentenced to death. So the judge turns to him and tells him, you realize what you did? He says, yes. You realize you did something that was never done before with such a brazen affront, audacity to do such a thing. How could you do it? And didn't you realize that what your punishment would be? So he answered, my father was a nothing, my grandfather was a nothing. Nobody in my family ever accomplished something of notoriety. And I decided I want to do something which will make me famous. So the judge says to him, but you realize you're going to die, don't you? And he answers, death is a small price to pay for immortality. So here you see a person is paying what could be called the ultimate price, and he's going to become famous. He's going to go down in history as the only one who went into their temple and smashed the idol. And by the way, it sounds very strange, but people that have done research about crime, it's been documented again and again that people do crime because they want to go down in history to be the most famous kidnapper, the most famous yada, 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 etc. It's a krankheit. But therefore, what do you see from this? That a person could give up his life. For what? For bad reasons, for evil. That's called selfish. So imagine you have a German soldier, a Nazi, Yimach Shemai, who's fighting a war. And what's his war about? His war is about murdering innocent people. His war is about stealing other people's land. So what are his motives? His motive is greed. His motive is hatred. And he sacrificed his life. What does that represent? Nothing. It's an expression of evil. It's something that started with evil, something which is wrong and immoral, and he gave up his life to it. So what? Now we have another story. This I heard from my mashpia, Melech Tzibul, and I didn't hear it from anyone else, and he repeated from one of the mashpiyim in Lubavitch. By the way, his yortzeit is coming up Sunday, Yutes Cheshvan. So he said the following story, which I think is amazing. They say, and he quoted this from one of his mashpiyim, who heard it from his mashpiyah. I think he heard it from Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, who heard it from Greinam, that Socrates, as everyone knows, he gave up his life for his beliefs. And he was told either he renounces all of his philosophy or he has to drink from the hemlock, the poison. He chose the poison and he died. So when he came Lamaila, when he came above, he said that he has to go into Gan Eden. He has to get paradise, heaven. And he said, Avram Avinu hat sich nur gewollt Mesiras Nefesh. Avram only wanted to go on Mesiras Nefesh, and he got paradise, and he got Gan Eden. I, who actually went on Mesiras Nefesh, definitely has to get Gan Eden. So he was told, no, it's a great Unterschied zwischen dir and Avram Avinu. There's a big difference between you and Avram Avinu. Du hast gebitten a Taive, a Fataive. You exchanged lusts. You understood that spirituality is eternal. So you looked at intellect, seichel, as something which is soul and something which is eternal. So you decided you traded ruchnius, spirituality, which can mean intellect, instead of chumrius. So it wasn't self-sacrifice, it's self-aggrandizement. It was a trade-in. You traded in your temporary existence of being a body of flesh for eternal existence, to be an existence of spirituality. It has nothing to do with self-sacrifice. It's self-aggrandizement. B'kitzur, it's connected to self. By Yid, sagt man nicht will und nicht kann sich abreißen für alle Kurs. By Yid, not he wants and not he can separate himself from Hashem. And that's what the Alter Rebbe says, that by Mesiras Nefesh, it's Belishum Taina Maina. We don't start weighing the pros and the cons. These are the pros if I give up my life, and these are the cons if I give up my life. And therefore, it makes more sense to go on Mesiras Nefesh. No! It's Ki'ilu without any cheshbonus whatsoever. Hineni! Hashem, I'm your ally. I'm in your team. What do you want? Whatever it is, I'm ready to do. Whatever the call of the hour is, here I am. Das is Ayid. And this is what it means, the answer that Rebbe explains between the 10th test and all the other previous 9 tests. All the other 9 tests, one could have argued and said that they were Mesiras Nefesh, which was Al Pi Seichel. Azami Mesiras Nefesh, that even Goyim could do. L'moshel, like there's a famous expression, give me liberty or give me death. Which means, let's talk about the Mesiras Nefesh before we mention the Nazi in Machshamoy. Let's talk about Mesiras Nefesh of an American. He has American values. He believes in democracy. He believes in human rights. He believes in our way of life. And therefore, he's ready to go on self-sacrifice for that cause, for that shitta. So in other words, what's the pshat self-sacrifice by him? For the greater good. He's trading in his life. He's giving away the self, but why? For something greater. So it makes sense. Das pshat Mesiras Nefesh, let's call it from Klippas Nega, it's still related to the self. Like Rabbi Vayeira used to say, a mensch kann nicht bespringen the cup. By a Yid, we say he could do something which is completely divorced from his self. So now, does that mean we said something bad about a guy? No. That is according to the rules of existence. It has to stay in Metzias. A mensch can nicht bespringen in the cup. Over here by Yid sagt man a chidush. What's the chidush? It's like saying a human can fly. So, das is mezak bichlal, the humans can't fly. That we understand. The kasha is, we're going to come along and we say, well, by the way, there is a human was ken yeflin. Teretz is, they bist gemacht. They bist dem gem knafayim. In us, the Ebish to put a chilik alikam mimal mamish, me alle brie, bligvul, and me mele can I eat tanazach, was a hepech abrie, un hepech yeder asechel, and the mile mitam vadas. And that's the true Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore the Ebish says, kach no. And if you fail me now, we'll say ayin b'rishonim. What does it mean ayin b'rishonim? That means it's all going to be not the Mesiras Nefesh for Yid. It's going to be an inyan was nicht be'emes Mesiras Nefesh. It's the Mesiras Nefesh, which is not really Mesiras Nefesh, but so shayches zu Ha'olam. It's not the inyan for Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit heißt, as a inyan amiti was in ganzen Hecher von deinem Metzias. And after you pass the 10th test, that's going to be Megala Lemefreya, that the Yisoid from the previous test weren't because it made sense. Oh, now they're like this. By all the other previous tests, I forgot to say this point, someone could say they all made sense for the good of the cause. What's the cause? The cause is monotheism. The cause is Elikus. The cause is Amunah in Ein Eibishter. So in every single one of the tests, but the Garangevar from Dur Kazdim, so it was a Kiddush Hashem, he smashed his idols, Lech Lecha. The world heard about it. This Lech Lecha. People heard about it. He packed his bag, he packed his belongings, and he left. And every single one of the previous tests was advertised on ABC, CNN, the Welt had gehed wegen them, and it was a demonstration of how there can be somebody who's so devoted and connected to Hashem Echad that he's ready to do whatever the Eibishter wants. Somebody could say, when it made sense, people will hear about it. It'll make the headlines. It'll be a Kiddush Hashem. V'chuli v'chuli. But over here, it's not all the Schwerigkeiten that's connected to the Akedah. The Eibishter Tam Shen gesagt, the continuation of the line of the movement, of the Shitta, of Yiddishkeit, Hashem Echad, is going to come through Yitzchak. And over here, the Eibishter is telling him, I want you to press this button, where the whole thing's going to blow up. There's not going to be no Hemshech. V'chuli v'chuli. When I nicht gefragt in Kashis, 1 minute, wait a minute, it doesn't make sense. You're not allowed to bechlal kill an innocent person. When Yitzchak isn't completely innocent, you're not allowed to commit murder. That's from the Shem v'chuli v'chuli. So what do we see from this? That even when they wish to will ask you to do something which is hepech hasechol and makes no sense, and there's no benefit, you have to give up on your principles, you have to give up on your mission, you have to give up on your purpose. There is no thing, there's no justification on any level whatsoever to do this thing. It's a suicide move. It's a loser's move. And B'meila, is Avram ready to do that? Ultimate obedience, absolute obedience, total loyalty. That whatever the Eibush will ask, even if it's hepech hasechel and makes no sense whatsoever, beniged to every other case of gaining something for the cause, are you ready to do that too? So that's the ufta of the Nesoyin and Aked. Like the Rebbe says in the Sikha, nobody was there except for Avram and Yitzchak. Nobody would have found out about it. And the whole thing would have not accomplished anything. And it would have been the end of Yiddishkeit. Yiskaral v'yiskara, shmer abo amen, finished. It would have been over. And still Avram was ready to do it. And that's what makes the Nesoyin of the Akedah something which is completely Jewish, which is connected to the Chelik Elikah Mimal Mamish, was Yidden Hob Maneshama. And like the Alter Rebbe says in Perikut Ches, that Nimshech Lebnei Machrei Matzev Kol Aderes, from Avram Avinu, this ability was a Yid, nicht will, und nicht ken sich abreißen von Elikus. This Monday, Mitzvah Hashem, is the Yom Haledes of the Rebbe Rashab, and it's so amazing that there's a story where the Rebbe Rashab took his child, his Binchas Yechidcha, the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was 15 years old, and he told the Frierdiker Rebbe, I'm making an Akedah with you, and he brought the Frierdiker Rebbe to the oil of the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash, the grandfather and the great-grandfather of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he tells the Frierdiker Rebbe, it's a very emotionally charged story, powerful, that when he took the Frierdiker Rebbe into Avodas HaKodesh and he made him his second lieutenant, his right-hand man in Avodas HaKlal. He was 15 years old. He wasn't married. And he said, I'm making an Akedah with you. I'm making a covenant with Yosef Yitzchak, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And you have to read the story. It's so astonishing. And he tells him the first principle in Avodas Hashem is Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice. And what does that mean? Azoi unit andish. Which means that you have to carry out the mission precisely, exactly. There's a precision to it and an exactness that you believe in the principles 100%, no compromise, no diluting, but 100% what the Eibishter wants. Azoi unitandish. The lessons, my friend, from this parsha are unbelievably relevant, and the Rebbe would many times speak about the concept of Mesiras Nefesh when it came to Yud Beis Tammuz time of the year. And again, the Rebbe would quote what it says in Chassidus, that today in a free country, we don't have to sacrifice our lives. You don't have to die al Kiddush Hashem, Baruch Hashem. We're living in free countries. We're not interrogated by the secret police. No one's torturing us and no one's killing us. So we should use that freedom to have the Mesiras Nefesh, that even if circumstances are not so comfortable, you won't have your orange juice this morning because the time is running and you have to leave breakfast early to run and catch that person to put on tefillin with him. That's Mesiras Nefesh. Or it means sometimes not doing what you want to do or doing what you don't want to do. There's actually a very famous story, I'm not going to get into it now, where the Frierdiker Rebbe says a story with the Baal Shem Tov, that there was a certain Jew, he saved up a whole year to buy an esrog, and his wife was so upset that she bit off the pitum. And she bit off the pitum of the esrog and made the whole esrog puzzle. And the husband did not get angry. And he said, oh, looks like I wasn't worthy of having a good esrog for Sukkot. Anyways, the Baal Shem Tov told his disciples that this man's act caused him, the Baal Shem Tov, it brought him great joy, and it brought the Eibush to great joy. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that the Baal Shem Tov said the following: since the time of the Akedah, there hasn't been such a test like the test of this man. I think his name was Reb David. Since the time of the Akedah, there hasn't been such a test like this man, Reb David, and he withstood the test. Think about it. We're comparing a commandment from God to sacrifice your own child, which anybody will agree that that would be the ultimate test. And here we're talking about something seemingly so mundane that your wife did something very, very upsetting and very, very annoying to you. And what's the test? Whether you're going to be angry at her or you're going to be humble and look at it as a sign from Hashem. And the Baal Shem Tov said that from the time of the Akedah, there was never such a test. Wow, wow, wow. And this is a lesson to us all, that in these two directions, whether it's a direction of self-restraint, self-control, or self-discipline, where we want to do something and it's not really something that the Eibishter wants, and we hold ourselves back. We want to talk Lashon Hara, or we want to get angry, and we control ourselves. Or we push ourselves the extra mile to do something, even though it involves a bit of hardship and some toil. Either way, this is what means Mesiras Nefesh, Mesiras Harotzen. We're giving over our will to Hashem, and the Eibishter looks at that and sees that as an amazing sacrifice. And this is what we have to realize, that as Yidden, we have this ability of a chelik elikah mimal mamish. We have this ability of transcendence, this level of transcendence, which was not given to any other people. So the Eibishter's help, we should take the koiches of this Mesiras Nefesh to be able to carry through whatever it is that is our shlichus for every single day, which will definitely cause the Geula Mitzvah Shlema take it from Yad Mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.